So you want to do a first look. I personally love first looks, and as a wedding planner, I think they have a lot of utility on the wedding day, but I also know that they're not for everyone. So in this video, we're going to be chatting about the pros and cons of a first look, if it's right for you, and some tips if you decide to put it in your wedding day timeline, all coming up. Hello, and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, or welcome back if you are not. My name is Kayla, and I'm the owner and lead wedding planner here at Transformed Events, where we help DIY couples to ball out on a budget. So without further ado, let's hop right into should you do a first look on your wedding day? For most couples and how weddings tend to be now in 2024, I would say yes. But like I said, that's most couples, it's not everyone. So before we dive into the points for why I think most people should do one, let's talk about who it might not be for. So the first type of person who shouldn't do a first look is if you really can't stand the idea of doing a first look, right? Kind of obvious. But I was one of those people as well that had this idea in my mind that a first look would take away from that sentimental moment of my husband seeing me for the first time down the aisle. So I didn't have it, but I do regret it. But if you do have a really strong conviction and you definitely just don't want to do it, then don't let me or anyone else pressure you into doing it. The second type of person is if you can't do a first look because of your culture or religious beliefs or systems or anything like that. So whether you believe it's bad luck for your marriage or whether your church doesn't allow it or anything like that, going against your beliefs for the sake of the timeline is never something that I would advise my couples to do because it's just not worth it. And there are plenty of other things that we could do to compensate for that time. The third type of person is if you don't need to have a first look because you have enough time in the wedding day timeline where it won't be tight and things won't be pushing against each other. This one kind of goes hand in hand with the first 2 points, and in my specific experience, specifically with Catholic weddings, there's typically a gap in between the ceremony end time and the cocktail hour or reception start time. So let's say the ceremony starts at 12, it ends at 1, and the reception doesn't start until 5. So you have all that extra time in between that gap to do whatever you want, to take photos, instead of having to front load those things before the ceremony. So now that those things are covered, here is why I recommend for most people to do a first look in 2024. So first is for timing considerations, second is to make the day feel a little bit slower, and third is to get some really great pictures. So let's get into these a little bit more. So the timeline is such a huge consideration for me as a wedding planner because it really is the foundation of your whole wedding day, right? It's helpful to think about the timeline like a sort of Jenga game. And so you're taking some pieces out, you're putting some pieces back in. And we all know that in Jenga, if you take the wrong piece out, the whole tower comes crashing down, right? What I'm not trying to say here is that your wedding day will just crash and burn if you don't have a first look. So please don't get scared at that. What I am trying to say is that we all try to pick the best pieces that will keep that Jenga tower stable, and having a first look is a great way to create stabilization in your wedding day timeline. It offers you the ability to accomplish things earlier in the day so that we can create pockets of buffer room later on in the day in case something is running a little bit behind, or maybe we had to move the order of events around a little bit, things like that. That Jenga tower has a lot less of a chance to fall over early in the game than it does later in the game, right? And the same is true of your wedding day. So the second point is to make the day feel slower. So what do I mean by that? Well, wedding days are hectic, quite frankly, and once that ceremony is over, you go into pictures, then you're mingling, then you're dancing, then speeches, then dinner, and it's just like boom, 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 back to back to back to back. And it can very easily feel like you don't even have time to just like take a breath and take it all in. Now, you can build those into your timeline, and you should in terms of like breather breaks, but the first look is really a chance to do that before the day even fully begins and before you actually need it, before the hectic chaos really started, right? You get to have this special moment with your favorite person and just be present and kind of let everything else fade into the background, right? It's especially helpful if you're someone who tends to get nervous in front of a lot of people, or say if you're battling social anxiety, because all those concerns are just non-existent for a second because you're with your favorite person. And I think it's just a really special moment, and it's needed more for us to just take those breaks, to have our person to just be a little bit more slower, especially in this post-COVID era. And then third, you get to take great couples portraits while you look your freshest. If you only have a 1 hour cocktail hour, it's really tough to balance getting all the family photos you want, all the wedding party photos, and couples portraits because that timeline is tight and it can very easily feel rushed, it can start to feel unenjoyable, and unfortunately it usually ends up affecting the couples portraits most because they're typically scheduled last, so that you take family photos, you take wedding party photos, those people can kind of get out the way, go enjoy cocktail hour, and then you do couples photos. But if you already took a ton of couples photos before the ceremony, then that cocktail hour time will have a lot more flexibility and you won't need to rush around as much because you got those photos that mattered the most out of the way first. So everything else that you get for couples portraits during that time is just extra after that, right? So, with all of those benefits of a first look, there are still a few cons that I'd be remiss not to address. So the first that I mentioned above is that you don't have that reveal for the first time down the aisle if that's something that you are looking forward to. But I also think that not having that moment publicly in front of everyone also does take a little bit of pressure off of both you and your future spouse for how you think you should act in that moment, right? And I actually made a whole other video about that topic that I'll link right above here. But it's just saying like, there's a lot of pressure to be a certain way. Maybe there's a lot of pressure for the groom to cry, things of that nature. And so once you already saw each other, then that pressure kind of goes away. Second is that you do need to be ready earlier, which may mean that you need to start hair and makeup earlier, which may mean that the day might be slightly longer than you were anticipating. So if you're already not an early bird, this may be a strong con for you. And for the third point, I really want you to let me know what is one of your cons for the first look. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments. So now we chatted about who it's for and who it's not, some pros and some cons. So finally, I want to wrap up with some tips on if you decide to include it in your timeline and how to do that if you are making your own timeline. So the first thing is, how far in advance of the ceremony should the first look be? I always have my couples first looks happen 2 hours before the ceremony start time. So say if your ceremony starts at 4 p.m., the first look should happen around 2 p.m. We can't get into all the specifics right now and the logic behind that for the sake of this video not being super duper long. But if you're starting from ground zero, that will at least help you get a starting point. The second is to predetermine who you want to be there. Do you only want it to be you two and the photographer, or do you want your friends and family to watch as well, right? And this is simply to just start getting you to think through those logistics of the day and plan the way that you want it to be. And then the third is that you want to communicate these decisions to everyone involved. So obviously your photographer, making sure there's enough time in their package to get there that early for the first look and also stay until when you want them to stay. Make sure your hair and makeup artists have the early arrival time noted. Make sure they have your ready by time noted, and that anyone else that it may directly or indirectly be involved with it, that they all are aware of the change. So that brings us to the end of this video. Again, please let me know in the comments any other pros or cons you see with doing a first look, and if you plan on doing one at your wedding. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!